It is apparently International Podcast Day on the day when I'm recording this. So, once again, it's time to try and put into words my take on the whole divine feminine and then femininity thing. And basically just what is it with people like Jonathan Pageau and a lot of people in the Christian symbolic world realm, advocating for, I think, a lot of what defines that corner of theology, and what they're advocating for is more of the feminine in religion, with whether that be the Theotokos Mary and the human and the inclusion of creation and sociology and it being participatory and living rather than propositional about faith or inclusion in a community of faith, or even women's roles. So that gets into the next thing that I'm saying. So on the one hand, I'll be advocating for that, and then using that to say, advocating for that on a theoretical and theological level, and then using that to then say, well, women can't be ministers, women should stay in the kitchen, so to speak, and also trans people are their sex assigned at birth. And for me, there's just, those two things do not go together. And I'm always just baffled by how that's the conclusion you're drawing here. And how, for me, it's very much taking the Lord's name in vain. It's very much using these very insightful truths and patterns in reality and within the church in order to suppress and deny people. And I'm just I was speaking in my video on why, I called it why fat lingerie models are not ruining society. So in there I was talking about, what was I talking about? I lost my train of thought. Thank you. Yeah, I was talking about kind of having this sort of bell curve, this sort of norm, this sort of pattern of structure and margins. And then what do you do with that? How do you kind of apply it? What do you do with that information? And there are people who will kind of try to push it down very literally into physical and social reality in such a way as to say, for instance, because the norm of genetically healthy humanity is such and such a type of person, therefore only those type of people should be able to reproduce. Or because the present norm in our society is a nuclear family with, husband, wife, and 2.5 kids, then only such families should be, everyone who's not that should be punished for not being that, over and above the punishment that you already get just from not being what's privileged or stressed. And anyway, that's one way of interpreting that and kind of bringing down that pattern. And I feel like that's a similar thing with what these symbolic world theologians do with women and men. I'm thinking of the They Might Be Giants song now. If I wanted to, I could probably look at the lyrics of that song and like use that to make this video, but yeah. So like, let me think, because so he'll say, for instance, the feminine, capital F, as a principle is inherently hidden. And if it ceases to be hidden, it then ceases to be the feminine. You've then made it something else, because it is the hidden. Therefore, women stay in the kitchen type shit. Or, maybe it's more something like women can't be ministers or priests in his case. And I'm like, okay, you've skipped so many steps in that equation. There's not a one-to-one correlation between human women, which, by the way you define that is troublesome in itself, and the feminine. Like, when you're talking about the feminine as a principle, it barely in any way has to do with human women. Like, it's more the other, or chaos, or that which is outside a certain structure relative to that structure. And as I myself was saying and have said before, yes, if you take the hidden, the unknown, the other, and you try and drag it into the light, so to speak, I think I made a video about this, about squids, and like a long time ago, the giant squid, and dragging it up and you kill it because the pressure collapses. If you take the other and you try and drag it into the light violently and colonize it essentially, then yes, it does cease to become the other and the unknown. Rather, that requires a movement of faith, stepping into the other and into the no, I'm not going to sing Frozen 2. The song's really catchy. But stepping into the unknown and with a reverence and a letting it be what it is in its own space. I would perhaps say that might suggest that maybe we should let women make their own decisions about their own bodies and the way in which they bring forth babies into the world. That paradigm does seem to suggest that, maybe. But I don't know. Okay, that was a tangent. But yeah, I don't really know. Now I'm thinking about the squid thing, which is a little bit different. But yeah, like, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not at all disagreeing that in the, in the heavens, in the structure of meaning that orders and brings forth manifestation of the world, if you take relative to a structure the other and you try to drag it into the structure violently, and you try and then it ceases to become itself. Kind of like, and I guess an example of this, using human women. This is so weird. But I ain't about to say adult human female, so so using an example in which, with human women, I guess I could just say women because we don't really call animals women, which would be funny if we did. And I'm not gonna say females either. There's so many minefields of vocabulary with this. But, so an example of that, I think, would be like, if, the idea of, like, strong female characters taking no cues about them actually being women. Like, the idea of you have a war movie and someone's like, "Well, we need to include women in this to be more inclusive. So what we're gonna do is basically take a man, switch him to a she her without even changing anything else, and just have her doing the same things that he would have done without adding any nuance, without it being at all relevant." That, yeah, or maybe just like super sexualized, but other than that, no. And that would be an example of, in that case, in the context of that kind of an action movie, the structure would be that of a tough guy, and the other would be that of a woman. um and especially a woman that's not just a sex object, but I guess even women that are sex objects would still be other to the structure of the tough guy. But then if you take that other and you just erase that, and you just kind of try and pull it in, you've lost it. You've lost it. It's not really a female character in any meaningful sense of the word, because you haven't given any thought to that which makes her her and stuff. And also, like, strong female characters that are across the board disdainful of anything that is associated with femininity. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that a woman can't dislike traditionally feminine things or anything, but, like, if you have an entire field of literature in which all of your female characters and all of your, like, strong female characters hate pink, hate sewing, and hate, come on, it's very shallow, and you kind of lost the essence of the thing that you were going for in the first place, and it is not empowering. So, yeah. On that, I guess, we're agreed. But then that is talking about, of course, that is talking about literature and not talking about real life. Because again, if all the women in the world just decided that they didn't want to do pink or sewing anymore, um, I guess that would be their decision, you know? So I guess maybe I've muddled the waters a little bit by going into literature, because that is still only a little bit less abstract than the idea of the feminine as a principle, the masculine as a principle, or otherwise said, autrement dit, the chaos and order, chaos and structure, and other and self. So that's a slightly less abstract interaction there, where the feminine. Then what if you had, like, I mean, I think there's also things where you can say there's certain, like, romance novels where, like, men are objectified. And again, due to society, or like, hold up, I'm getting real in the weeds here. I don't think this is where I want to go with this. But it is possible in certain contexts, first off, for men to play that role of, for, like, human men to play that role of, like, the other, or feminine in relation to, yeah. I guess I was thinking, I'm not sure how relevant this is, but, like, there's romance novels that, like, basically just, like, objectify men too. Um, in a similar way. I mean, it's not entirely on a social level the same, just because of society or whatever. It doesn't have quite the same impact, but it is still a thing, and it's still, if you're looking for a nuanced depiction of men, you ain't getting it there. Just like if you're looking for a nuanced depiction of women, You're not getting it from action movie with token female soldier. So, but even that just demonstrates that this is a lot deeper and more abstract than just a one-to-one correlation all the way up in the realm of the symbolic masculine and the symbolic feminine, or as I prefer, well, honestly, the terms that I use are Saidin and Saidar from the Wheel of Time, but those are mine. Or I think order and chaos, or structure and chaos is usually a little clearer because, again, the terms are so with human cultural baggage, and that really is not. Anyway, the suggestion that it's much more nuanced and much more fractal and chiastic than the idea that there's this one-to-one correlation between the masculine and the feminine all the way down to modern Western men and modern Western women. Like, there's just not. And however, you can see where that logic comes from. And especially if you yourself are immersed in a subculture such as that of the Orthodox Church, where the people that you are surrounded by very much do conform to that. So you do have women that do certain things and men that do certain things and are a certain way, and they're straight and they straight marry each other and they have kids and stuff. That makes it easier to see. And regardless of that, there is some correlation because words have meanings and we do call it that for a reason. There is some correlation. But it's not this one-to-one hegemonic, one-to-one, like, controlling correlation. It is, first of all, subject to the fractality and the, like, chiasticness and inherent paradoxes that by which these kinds of things are. There's lots of different ways to look at it, and you can usually reverse the way you're looking at it because, again, matter is multiple and is very nuanced and complex. And secondarily, it's not a forced one-to-one correspondence. First of all, those two categories are pretty, as I said, they're pretty vague or pretty complex in the first place. Second of all, it's a participatory thing. Vague and also culturally dependent too. But it's a participatory thing. Also. And honestly, the way that, I don't want to keep picking on Jonathan Pajot, it's just that he kind of, like, parasocially mentored me when I was first getting into all of this, so I have special disappointment in my heart reserved for him. But let's say TLC, symbolic world theologians. Oh god, what was I going to even say about them now? Hold up. Oh yes, okay. So they would define participation in a religious group, like, say, Christianity, as participatory, right? They would define membership and identity and belonging to that group as participatory and not propositional, right? So instead of, like, if you verbally affirm such and such a creed and you have all the right doctrine, it's more like, well, if you go to church every week and you take communion, and if you pray and pattern your life after Christ and stuff, then you are, by definition, you are in it. You're participating in it. And you're kind of brought into that fold of the world that is created and structured by these symbols and these images and these patterns of the Christian world. Again, like I was saying with the faith and gateway and stuff, you're in or you're out. If you're in, then you're in. That's its own reward, and that is its own thing. And you can't be in without, etc. So basically, they have a pretty robust schema of identity and definition via participation for something like a religion. For me, it seems like that would be naturally the way that they would think about sex and gender as well, because it's like the same kind of thing. But they don't. So I feel like a lot of these people are playing 4D chess when it comes to, in personal virtue or inclusion in the Christian religion. And then they suddenly are like a baby with baby blocks when it comes to what is a woman. And I'm like, why did you lose all your critical thinking skills all of a sudden? And I don't know, because there's certainly, just like there's ways to define gender more symbolically and participatorily versus more propositionally and by a strict objective definition, so there's also ways to define religion, either more participatory or more propositional. There have been certain times when certain races of people were excluded from Christianity. And when, like, if you don't, I don't know, if you commit this particular sin, you're out. If you're gay, you're out. Well, I guess they kind of think that too. But I'm just, there's ways to define it in a similar way. Yeah, there's ways to really put up those boundaries. And to me, that attitude, which these theologians would condemn when Christianity, is the same attitude as that which says adult human female, which, if you don't know, is the TERF, trans-exclusionary radical feminist. Not religious, but they have similar opinions to a lot of religious people. Yeah, that's their kind of definition. Their propositional definition for what a woman is adult human female. And I feel like a lot of these theologians would probably basically agree with that, except they would add some shit in about, like, who, expresses God's divine femininity, or maybe they wouldn't say that, but, like, who expresses the divine feminine and the hiddenness of all things. And it's like, just because you're putting pretty words on it doesn't make it any less small-minded and mean in the original sense. Kind of very petty and small and mean. Just because you're using these big theology words doesn't mean you aren't just agreeing with, like, really, you can't use a little bit more nuance of thought like you do with other subjects. And I do intend to formulate this better as time goes on. This is just some thoughts I'm stringing together because I'm starting to find language for it a little bit. But yeah, it'll get more clear. Excuse me. So, yeah, to me, given the things that symbolic world theologians believe about the world, why wouldn't they believe that gender also is participatory like that? Like every single other category on Earth. Being a cup is participatory. If you put water in a shell and you're drinking out of it, it's being a cup. Yeah. Or what is it that Pajot says about a chair? That, and affordances and all that. Now, I am not speaking from like gender theory. I don't know primarily about gender theory. I know about theology, and I know a little bit about gender theory enough to dabble and to find broad things that I like personally. I'm not saying this is the only theory of gender. Obviously, that's not how theories work. There's lots, and there's different perspectives. But a way that I really like to look at it, for me, and a way that is a valid way to look at it, even though it's not the only one. And I have to keep saying this because, again, propositionalism would say that there's one way and it's the only way, and you just, yeah. Anyway, so a way that I usually look at it, and a way that I really like to look at it, and a way that I think, despite being, very leftist or whatever, it really fits more with the symbolic world a lot better than that which they actually use, is to say that gender is participation in that gender. And again, that's your kind of bell curve, and it's going to be culturally subject to cultural and rules over time and space. But more or less, you are being a woman or a man to insofar as, you participate in that which constitutes it. And those things can change because they have changed. Because the ancient world didn't even think of gender in a binary the way that we do. And I don't know enough about that subject to say exactly how they did think of it, but I know that it wasn't the way that we do. Like, this wouldn't even make sense to them at all. Okay, I actually may have not thought this through fully, because now I'm saying this. Okay, let's say that the symbolic world theology did say that gender is participatory, and it's like this bell curve. So, a woman would be anybody who, but then they would say, so maybe a trans woman could be a woman if she wasn't, if she like submitted to her husband, and which is not what I'm getting at. Why did I even bring that up in the first place about it being participatory? I have no idea where I am. I mean, I guess that's better than I guess that's better than the XX chromosomes thing, to say that you have a certain or you have a certain cluster of traits that constitutes femininity and masculine or womanness and manness, and people who participate in, a certain, or vaguely people who are kind of in that space of participating in that cluster of traits, and that could be anything from having a certain anatomy to having a certain name and pronouns to playing a certain role in one's family life. Is a woman or a man, then that still doesn't really get at what I'm trying to get at, because you would still then say, well, a man's role is to be a minister in the church, and a woman's role, or a priest maybe, and a woman's role is to not be that. And if you step out of that, you're no longer participating in if a woman steps out of that, then she's no longer really as much of a woman. I mean, I guess in the eyes of society, yeah, okay. But like, why did I even bring this up? Isn't that what they think? Isn't that exactly what is being said? Is that the the feminine, like, is this certain Hmm. I have lost my complete where I was going with this. I'm not saying I'm wrong because this is not the reasons why I believe any of this. I believe it because of my common sense and my life experience. But, I guess the fact is that those kind of clusters of traits that define man and woman can and do change because we can observe that. And they also are not like the tablets of the law, they didn't come down formed from the heavens. Um, they're different across cultures and religions and times. And some of them, and even though they change, it doesn't mean that they go away. And so, again, you come to what I was talking about with enforcing norms versus widening norms and trying to help those who need a hand up. Through all the years of human history and through all of the alarmists, men and women have existed. People outside of that have also existed. It's been chill. It's been fine. And we've even made some cool things, like women no longer being looked at as property. And, you know, understandings of men as having the same emotional capacity as women. Those are nice. Those are nice things. And I don't see anybody advocating to not change those things. You know? Go. Like, that's the fact, is that the things in that cluster of traits, one of those used to be that what defined a woman as a woman was she was property. One of them now, in the symbolic theology world type cluster of traits, is that what defines a woman as a woman is that she is not a priest. And if she is, she's no longer a woman. If we changed that, would it in fact destroy the fabric of society? No, because some people have already changed it then. But no, and would it destroy the concept of womanhood? No, it really wouldn't. You you because it's this living and relational thing. And as long as there are people who will identify with and participate in and create womanhood and manhood as categories and as lived experiences in all their different ways and to all their different extents, then those are going to stay a thing. They're going to stay being a thing, even if not in quite the same way for each person, which it isn't the same way for each person, and not in quite the same way over time and space, which it never has been. And that's okay. And, we don't have to control people about it. Like, there's people, and the more you control them, the more that you need to control, and the more that you're then trying to hold together this house of cards instead of something being organic and stable. But, like, if you look at it right now, there's people who don't like the gender binary at all, or they view it in a different way and they want to be outside of it. There's people who, are raised and socialized as a woman or a man, and they love that, and they do that. And they do all the well, not all, of course, not 100% bell curve, but like they do their traditional woman and man things in their society, and that's who they are, and they like it, and that's them. And then there's people who identify with and wish to participate in something that they weren't socialized into so much that they're going to change the way that they move through the world and change even their bodies in order to then come over and be in a different space. And that kind of shows that, like, that, yeah, these categories may be imperfect and constantly changing and participating in the same systemic ills of the world that every other category does. But they're still a real thing, and not letting people be trans or not letting people be non-conforming is just only weakening that. In the same way as not letting a wide genetic variety of people reproduce, the human race will go extinct. And like, just like if we try to give a strict in or out propositional definition of what is a man and a woman, manhood and womanhood will go extinct too, in the sense that all you'll be left with is those caricatures, like the caricatures in action movies. And these are living realities, they're not caricatures. I think I ended up talking more about the social and cultural categories of men and women more than I was talking about like the divine feminine and masculine, so to speak, or order and chaos and its relation to those cultural categories. Let me see if I can tie that back in, because what I had wanted to do was try and address a response to the whole, okay, the principle of the feminine is hiddenness and is nurturing and is the kind of the soil and the matrix. Therefore, women today should nurture kids and must not be in prominent public positions, and that's what's good for them. Because the principles of the feminine are what structures that social category of woman. And I think that would also suggest that, again, if a trans woman did conform to those things, she would be, but maybe that's where I got sidetracked. Misogyny is for everyone. There are people who think like that. And on that front, I guess, again, it's not a one-to-one correlation, actually. And there will always be, people with wombs who want to have children and stuff. And then once they have those children, they want to raise them because that's a new human being and they want to pour their life into bringing it up. I mean, that's not going to go away. It's a pretty powerful biological thing. And there's people who can't biologically have children for one reason or another who will want to adopt and have families and everything. And children will always be nurtured. I guess I'm just trying to say that these principles that are so high up are very high up. They're very abstract. They're very far up in the heavens, in the realm of meaning, so to speak. They're very broad. When they come down, it becomes diffused through a lot of little fractal patterns, and the scope of it is very broad. And it's okay. It's very strong and very much part of the fabric of the universe. And each human being is made up of many, many fractal instances of order and chaos. Sidine, Sidar, in my terms, the feminine and the masculine. And so, it's not going anywhere just because it shifts as it's been shifting for all of human history. It's not going anywhere just because now gay marriage is a thing, or just because now women aren't property anymore, which kind of messes up the whole economic thing that marriage, used to be, but we go and we figure something else out. It isn't going away just because some people who are viewed by the world as men say that they're actually women and live as women. Like, this is not, it doesn't touch. Like, things are just so much freer than that. You can really play with them, and I think the symbolic worldview allows for that kind of play and interplay, and indeed is based upon it in every realm, and paradox and fractality and inversions and chiasm, and there's no limit to that. And different people who have the desire to coming into a participatory sphere only enriches it and doesn't water it down. It enriches it and prevents it from going stagnant and becoming dead. Women enrich the priesthood, and men enrich child rearing and pregnancy, because there's trans men who are pregnant. Yeah, like, evil being a failure of the imagination. I don't know, come on in the water's great. Like, I mean, I would say you can imagine a world in which these things are possible, but it's like, you don't have to imagine it. This is the world we live in. Why have you got your head in the sand? Because of some abstract argument for why it can't exist, but it does. Well, that was more exhortative. I think hopefully later I can more formally lay out about the relation between the feminine as a principle, or that is to say, the other and chaos as a principle, and the relation between that and, like, human women in 2024. But for now, I'm just going to read. I have a lot of blackout poems that honestly are relevant to this, but I'm just going to read 2 of them. Because, again, poetic language is really, that's the most accurate of the truth. The Lord cannot conquer you, untold treasure so complex. Devotion has robbed souls by surrounding them with a world hostile to their existence. Know, destroy, prevent from thinking their own thoughts, while, effortless, day after day, selves long, and begin. Your life is holy, real. The want, all-compelling, of your life is prayer. Oh, this one too. Christ reigns over a redeemed and restored world, the earth, live, extraordinary. It is difficult to understand Christians who insist upon living in crisis as if crisis existed. Plenty of time to play and enjoy the pleasures of the world, well at ease. The world burns, of Christ. Measure not how much, how much, how much. Need the world total, not judged. Easy. Take religion lightly. Play at religion. Religion being universally played. Garden overrun. Cultivate wilderness. Faith never means gullibility. Believe everything. Keep dead poison out of the life stream. Everything occult and esoteric, everything weird and strange. All this is matter. Or, as the Oh Hellos say, we are matter and it matters.